behind for the holidays, calling this a working vacation as he looks ahead to the new year. Hello, I'm Rick Leventhal, live inside America's Newsroom, in for Bill Hemmer this morning. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be with you.
Hello. It was cold outside this morning.
Very cold.
Thank goodness we're in this air-conditioned studio. Nice and toasty in here. I'm Julie Banderas in for Sandra Smith. Of course, the president signed a sweeping overhaul of the U.S. tax code just before Christmas, and now he's looking to ride a wave of momentum into the new year. Rich Edson is live in West Palm Beach, Florida this morning for us. Hey there, Rich.
Hey, good morning, Julie. And from here, the president says, and the White House says, that serious discussions on the 2018 congressional agenda will begin the early part of next year after President Trump returns from Mar-a-Lago. Not sure what the president's schedule is today. He's got nothing on his public plans. Yesterday, he played some golf. Day before, he enjoyed Christmas with his family. The president, though, on Twitter has been touting the successes of the Republican Congress, in particular the last part of the year in 2017. He tweeted, quote, "All signs are that business is looking really good for the next year, only to be helped further by our tax cut bill. Will be a great year for companies and jobs. Stock market is poised for another year of success." Democrats are still criticizing that effort as one that will add substantially to the national debt and largely benefit corporations and the wealthy. Now, as for next year's congressional agenda and the Republican agenda, the White House says the president will be meeting with House Speaker Paul Ryan, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, the first weekend in January at Camp David, where they will outline their priorities. Expected to be atop that list, infrastructure.
Infrastructure is the easiest of all. We're very well on our way. People want it, Republicans and Democrats. We're going to have tremendous Democrat support on infrastructure, as you know.
Now, Democrats say they are interested in working with the White House and Republicans on infrastructure, though the details are still outstanding. How much the White House and Democrats are looking to spend on this infrastructure proposal, and also where the money is going to come from. So those details, at least on the Republican side, the White House is looking to iron out in the first part of the year, just as Congress is getting back and Democrats and Republicans begin to figure out exactly how they're going to approach 2018. The president also this week asked Republicans and Democrats to work together on a health care proposal and a health care law. Remember, Republicans essentially tried to go this one alone earlier this year. That was unsuccessful as they couldn't get a health care law or a health care proposal through the Senate. They could give it a shot again, but there are two very different approaches to health care, as there have been for the last decade or so. Republicans say they want to repeal and replace Obamacare. Democrats say they simply want to improve the law. You add that to a host of other issues like immigration, budgeting, and the debt ceiling. It's going to be a busy 2018, one that is also a midterm election year. Julie and Rick, back to you.
No pressure. Rich Edson, thank you.
None at all.
Rick.
For more on President Trump's 2018 legislative agenda, let's bring in Hugo Gordon, editorial director for the Washington Examiner. Good morning, Hugo.
Good morning.
So as we heard from Rich and from the president, it's all about infrastructure in 2018. And the president has said he believes he can work with Democrats on that. Is that overly optimistic?
I don't think it's overly optimistic. I think that the Democrats are, really telling the truth when they say that they would like to get this done. As you probably remember, they spent $1 trillion on infrastructure and shovel-ready projects at the beginning of the Obama administration, and they have no objection to that. The details, however, will be the difficult ones. The Republicans are looking at a package which will be about $200 billion of federal spending, and the Democrats are going to want it to be much higher than that. The Republicans would like there to be a private-public partnership, and that's not something the Democrats necessarily like. And there'll be a lot of bargaining because, the more that the Republican conservatives see projects in this infrastructure package as being kind of a boondoggle, the more of them might drop out, the more that Speaker Ryan is going to have to get Democrats in and supporting it, and that means the more that the package will shift towards the Democratic priorities. So there's a lot of hard bargaining, but it may well be that the Democrats think, you know what, we're going to oppose everything else that the Republicans and President Trump propose between now and the midterm elections. This gives us the opportunity to agree to something and not look like obstructionists.
Yeah, a double-edged sword perhaps for Democrats who want to get things done for their constituents, like building bridges and fixing roads, but also don't want to be seen as working with the president when they want to win midterms and win back perhaps control of the House or the Senate.
Exactly so. They believe that there is a wave that's going to bring them the House. I think that they would be in their private moments, sort of skeptical about the probability or the possibility of it bringing back the Senate, although that's, I suppose it's just about possible. But they're defending twice as many Senate seats as the Republicans are. So I think that they've got a tough challenge right there. But in the House, history suggests that the party of the president takes a drubbing in the first midterms after the new president comes in. So the Democrats need 24 seats to take back the majority, and I think that they think that's within the realms of possibility. So they've got a fired up base. They've got a lot of challengers, a lot of people who want to run as Democrats in this wave. And so they're going to be mostly an opposition, not a cooperative party.
This strikes me as a pretty good place to start, though. If they can repair bridges and they can repair roads, that will look good for President Trump and for Republicans heading into the 2018 midterms.
I think that's exactly right. I think that this is what President Trump wants to do. It's what the Speaker and a Majority Leader want to do, but it's also, I think, what Democrats want to do. So they're of one mind in the respect that they want to get this thing done. There's much harder troubles to be done on. For example, there's talk of welfare reform. It's very difficult. I mean, even Mitch McConnell is skeptical about that, even though Speaker Ryan wants to do it.
Yeah.
There's other things on the agenda that the Republicans would like to do, and they'll get no help whatever from Democrats on that.
Well, he's also wrestling with this Russia investigation. He's been tweeting from his vacation, his working vacation, criticizing the FBI for basing that investigation on the dossier funded, he says, by the DNC and the Clinton campaign, and touted that they cannot verify the claims in that dossier. How much of an impact do you think this ongoing investigation will have on the Trump administration coming up in 2018?
Well, the president is obviously incredibly frustrated and increasingly frustrated about the dossier. The deputy director of the FBI testified to the House Intelligence Committee just last week, and he didn't give them a single piece of information about what was verified or if anything was verified in this dossier, except for the fact that Carter Page, a low-level guy in the Team Trump during the election, had gone to Moscow. But that was in the news media before the dossier was even written. So in other words, not a single thing in the dossier has been verified, and the deputy director is not willing to say that anything has been. And there's just so many salacious and unverified things in there that, I'm sure that the president is immensely frustrated. The real problem for him, though, is that tweeting like this gives the impression of a president perhaps trying to interfere with an investigation, and that's just the sort of thing that Special Counsel Robert Mueller will be documenting, and it would go into his final report, which, after the 2018 election, should the Democrats do really well, would be the basis for an impeachment if they really wanted to pursue that path.
Well, we're going to talk about that coming up later this hour. Hugo Gordon, thanks very much for your time this morning.
Thanks very much.
Julie?
A Fox News alert: portions of the United States still digging out from a massive Christmas weekend storm that dumped over 5 feet of snow near Erie, Pennsylvania.
Today we'll be out probably 10, 15 hours easily. We've been out since 2 in the morning.
It was pretty tough at the end of the driveway. I probably spent a good hour just on the end of the driveway getting through it. Plus it was higher than a snowblower, so take little cuts and eventually you get through it.
All I could do was laugh. It's a little ridiculous, but I keep pecking away at it and we'll get it clear.
Take it slow. You remember, this is a dangerous time of year. A lot of people actually do suffer from heart attacks when they are trying to shovel out all this snow. But Adam Klotz joins us now with a look at the frigid temperatures in store as folks get set to ring in the new year. This is going to be a bitter new year.
It's going to be frigid, and I would love to say that it's going to warm up a little bit and some of that snow will melt, but that's not the case. We've got wind chill advisories and warnings and watches stretching all the way from the Plains State all the way across the northern tier of the country, running over to Maine at this point. That indicates winds and frigid temperatures. Here are your current feels like. Feels like -20. That is 20 below, just near it in Chicago. 2 degrees below in Kansas City. 33 degrees below in Fargo. I can drill into that colder area Also, though, notice spots where it's usually a bit warmer. Feels like 26 degrees in Dallas, Texas here early this morning. Getting rid of the wind chill. These are the current actual temperatures, and you're looking at a big swath of states here in the northern plains and running up into the Great Lakes states where temps are sitting at least in the negative single digits, but running up into the teens and 20s, and in some cases even the middle 30s for your temperature, your actual temperature. That's not even including wind chill when you step outside in some of these locations. The day's highs, it tries to warm up. It struggles to do so. Minneapolis topping off only at 5 degrees, 11 degrees in Chicago, 13 degrees there over into the Cleveland area. And then you're looking at a tad bit warmer here on the East Coast, but still very cold, especially when you include that wind chill. It stays cold every single morning, and that's one of the important things. As you begin to run here closer and closer to, there's your New Year's Eve morning, New Year's Day. That's what we're waking up to. So these temperatures down in the teens and single digits all the way from now to the start of 2018, Julie.
All right. Adam Klotz, thank you very much. Rick.
A hero cop springing into action, saving an 8-year-old boy who fell through a frozen pond in Utah. The officer braving the elements and breaking the ice with his bare hands, helping that boy get out alive.
I was getting desperate. I had searched the entire broken out area, and he was back underneath the ice beyond the broken out area. And I was actually calling out to him.
The boy was flown to the hospital. No word on his condition. The officer, being treated for minor cuts and hypothermia, broke through the ice with his bare hands.
And you can see him getting choked up there as well. But that obviously had to have been such an emotional rescue. If he had to break through the ice, the boy was obviously probably beginning to lose consciousness. So it's a miracle he didn't drown before he got to him.
Yeah.
What an incredible
good
story.
for him. And we're
kudos to the rest.
I don't know if you saw on that weather map, -2 in Caribou.
It's ridiculous. I'm pretty sure it's -2 with the wind chill here. I think it's -2 in the studio, quite frankly, but that's just me.
That's how we like it here.
Yeah, I know.
Meaning me.
You like it cold. I get it. All right. Well, Democrats are reportedly facing a growing split over whether to push for President Trump's impeachment as they attempt to take back the House next year. So would an impeachment message help or hurt? Democrats, our political panel, weighs in.
Plus, could Robert Mueller's team be gearing up for another indictment? What a new report is saying amid questions over what's next in the Russia probe. We'll talk to a legal expert.
And one quick-thinking Wendy's customer fights back to stop a brazen Christmas night robbery. Details next.
Only identified as Daniel, says a knife-wielding suspect entered the restaurant and tried to empty the register. That's when Daniel decided to take matters into his own hands, slamming a chair over the robber's head and ultimately forcing him to run away empty-handed. And I know, Julie Banderas, that you would have done the exact same thing.
I would have used the heel of my shoe instead of the chair. That reminds me of a Geraldo episode right there. Wasn't Geraldo smacked in the head with a wooden chair back in his talk show days?
I believe he was.
Yeah. He should have been wearing these heels. That's what he should have had. All right, moving on.
I don't think we want to see that.
What I think the White House can take a certain degree of comfort in is that they're finishing this year with no indictment that's directly related to the campaign or to the current Trump White House. So there is some reason for them to be optimistic, but I would never put a timeline on it, and I would never bet on what's coming down the pike.
No, that was George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley last night amid growing questions over what is next in the Russia probe. One of President Trump's lawyers telling the Wall Street Journal this week they expect a quick end, expeditious, I believe is the word they used, to the portion of the investigation involving the president. But the headlines continue. The Daily Beast reporting Robert Mueller's team could indict former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort again, potentially over tax issues. Joining us now, Jamil Jaffer, founder of the National Security Institute at George Mason University Law School and former senior advisor to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Thank you so much for talking to us. There is no end to this chapter. There is word that more charges could be waiting in the wings for Paul Manafort. It's what it's called a superseding indictment, which would replace the current indictment in which Manafort pleaded not guilty when Mueller's team originally filed their indictment in October. Could Paul Manafort be indicted again?
Look, I think there's certainly a real possibility that the indictment will be expanded, additional charges brought, additional facts put out there by the special prosecutor's office. Look, the idea that somehow this investigation is going to end in a few months, I think is highly unlikely. You look at the Whitewater investigation in the Clinton administration, that started in 1992, went to 2003. So that was over a decade. The idea that sort of 7-8 months in, this is going to come to a quick end seems highly unlikely.
Trump lawyers hoping for a quick end to the investigation. You say that's unlikely. Michael Flynn, okay, he pled guilty, but we still don't know what was in his plea deal. Are we ever going to know?
Well, look, I think that there are going to be additional charges filed against other folks at some point down the road if they do find other evidence. Clearly, they think that Michael Flynn has something to offer them, just like they believe Papadopoulos has something to offer them, because they get them very, very sort of light touch deals, right? These are very small charges. When we know there are a lot of other charges that could be brought both against Flynn and his son for not disclosing the payments that they got from Turkey.
Mueller has had 7 months to come out with something since he was appointed. So far, he has not come up with a campaign-related indictment. Is that good news?
Well, look, I think it's obviously good news for the administration. They get out of the year without an indictment, and that's important, I think, and they're right to point that out. That being said, you know, Bob Mueller is a very careful investigator, and it's not surprising that he'd be sort of slowly stepping up the pressure, identifying people that he could bring charges against, and then trying to build a case, a larger case. Now, it doesn't mean he has anything. You know, the history of these special counsel investigations is they charge people with other stuff not related to the underlying conduct. So this is not unusual.
Yeah. When he was appointed by Rosenstein, though, I mean, his main goal was to uncover collusion. So far, he has not done that. The year is about to end. He's had 7 months to do the job. There are a lot of Republicans. Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona, he serves on the House Judiciary Committee. He actually wrote an op-ed piece in USA Today calling for Mueller to step aside. He titled it "End the Witch Hunt." And I want to read some of what he wrote. Today, Mueller's investigation is clearly careening far beyond the scope of his original charge. Unfortunately, taxpayer resources are being used to scrutinize anyone and anything that fits into a preconceived notion that Russia colluded with the Trump campaign to fix the election. What do you believe now, 7 months into the job, is Mueller's endgame?
Well, look, I think at the end of the day, Mueller's going to try to complete his investigation, identify whether there was any collusion or anything like that. But the real challenge here is that oftentimes these special counsel investigations go on and on and on, and they don't involve the underlying conduct. And so Representative Biggs has been calling for a long time for Mueller to step down. He makes a good point. There are deep concerns about the behavior of some of the people inside the investigation who, to Mueller's credit, he did fire, right? Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, he did get them off the investigation. But there are deep concerns about the behavior they exhibited in those text messages.
All right, Jamil Jaffer, thank you much.
Thanks for having me.
Rick.
3 cities suing the Pentagon, what they say it's failing to do to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
And a potential breakthrough, what South Korea is saying could happen in 2018 to ease the nuclear tension with the North.
Cities are now suing the Defense Department, alleging that the Pentagon failed to report criminal convictions of people in the military to the FBI's background check database. The lawsuit pointing to the fact that former Airman Devin Kelly was allowed to buy a gun that he used to shoot 26 people in a Texas church in November, despite a conviction for domestic violence.
An optimistic projection for 2018 from South Korea, predicting that Kim Jong-un will actually look into open negotiations with the United States in 2018 over the fate of its nuclear program. This coming on the heels of a U.S.-backed round of increased sanctions from the United Nations, coming in a unanimous vote Friday. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live in London for us. So, Greg, what is the likelihood of talks with North Korea?
I'm not too sure, Julie. There is certainly talk of talks with North Korea, but that's about as far as it's going so far. The South Korean government did say this week that they believe that North Korea would talk with the U.S. in 2018 about its banned nuclear and missile programs, but doesn't offer an explanation, and in the same breath says that they will continue testing those missiles and perhaps the nuclear devices. In fact, despite those new sanctions that you just mentioned, not just from the UN, but just yesterday from the Treasury Department against North Korea, it seems that they will continue these tests. North Korea propaganda media saying that it is a pipe dream to think that they will give up their nuclear weapons. And there are brand new reports that they might be planning in 2018 yet another one of these satellite launches. That, too, is seen as just a cover for long-range ballistic missile testing, Julie.
And I believe there are fresh concerns, right, about North Korea, and they may be possibly building biological weapons.
Well, this has been a worry for the past several months, Julie, but now this week there are new worries because they did a test. Doctors did some examinations of one of the defectors, North Korean soldiers that came across from the north to the south, and they found in the body of that soldier alive anthrax antibodies. Now, that could indicate, this is what they're thinking, that the soldier was vaccinated against anthrax because he might have been carrying, handling, coming into some kind of contact with anthrax supplies in North Korea. There is a growing evidence of thought that Pyongyang has both biological and chemical weapons, and they could put them on top of these missiles. Just in this past year, of course, we saw the death of the estranged brother of Kim Jong-un in Malaysia. It's believed North Korea was behind it, and it was believed a VX agent was used to do the killing. The worries never end, Julie. Back to you.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Greg Palcott, thank you so much. Rick.
A passenger jet 4 hours into an 11-hour flight forced to turn back. Why police say the whole thing was caused by a, quote, mix-up.
We'll see about that. Plus, Democrats have repeatedly called for President Trump's removal from office. But will impeachment really become their mantra as they try to flip the House in the 2018 midterm elections? Our political panel will weigh in.
Donald John Trump, by causing such harm to society, to the society of the United States, is unfit to be president, warrants impeachment.
Office, but will impeachment really become their mantra as they try to flip the House in the 2018 midterm elections? Our political panel will weigh in.
Donald John Trump, by causing such harm to society, to the society of the United States, is unfit to be president, warrants impeachment, trial, and removal from office.
His actions are contemptible, and I will fight every day until he is impeached.
I rise today, Mr. Speaker, to call for the impeachment of the President of the United States of America.
The president's fitness for office is something that is being called into question. I'm very worried about his fitness.
Impeachment. It's a word Democrats have thrown around during President Trump's first year in office, and it could become a rallying cry for the left as they look to take back control of the House in 2018. But a prominent member of their own party, New York Congressman Jerry Nadler, is warning against that, telling Politico, quote, impeachment is not something you ought to welcome. It's not something you want. So why are they talking about it? Let's bring in Brad Blakeman, former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush, and Dennis Kucinich, former Democratic congressman of Ohio and Fox News contributor. Good morning to you both.
Good morning.
So Politico says there is a, quote, tidal wave of liberal disdain for the president, and that polls show 3/4 of Democrats favor impeachment. Dennis, seriously?
Well, first of all, we have to be careful that we're not trying to recreate the 2016 election. And I think that we want to bring Democrats back who may have voted for Donald Trump. And a way to do that, instead of focusing on replacing President Trump and bringing in a President Pence, we ought to be focusing on the things that attract people to the Democratic Party: jobs, wages, health care, education, retirement security. That'll get people excited about voting Democrat, and that's what we ought to be doing instead of focusing on, as Mr. Nadler of New York says, this process of impeachment, which could be quite problematic legislatively.
Brad, it's one thing to disagree with the president or not like the president. It's another thing to be calling for his impeachment.
There's no doubt about it, but they've been doing that since the day he was elected. This is wishful thinking on the part of Democrats. It's not within the realm of possibility that it would happen. And it's a dog whistle. And if they were smart, they would listen to smart people like Dennis Kucinich and Jerry Nadler from New York, who I rarely agree with, but I agree with here, that Democrats have to concentrate on the issues. And when people go into the voting booth, especially in midterm elections, not only is it a report card on the party in power, but it is also how well the American people are doing financially. People vote with their pocketbooks. And right now, there's a wind at the president's back with tax reform. And if they can manage to amplify those achievements as we move into the spring with health care reform and in infrastructure and immigration, then the Republicans will be in a good stead. But Democrats should focus on issues if they have any hope of making headway in the midterms.
Dennis, 58 House Democrats actually voted to bring debate on articles of impeachment. It doesn't sound like they're focusing on agenda.
Well, look, I understand about impeachment. You have to remember, I was the one who brought articles of impeachment challenging President George W. Bush on his conduct of the war in Iraq and the reason for going into war. I understand that. I also knew that the Democratic leaders, they would not go along with it. Look, right now we have serious economic problems that are affecting a lot of working class and middle class people. The Democrats have a great opportunity to reach into that constituency. And for those who voted for Donald Trump and to say, look, here's our platform, here's our program, this is why you should vote Democrat. And when you do that, I think people will respond. But just focusing in on Donald Trump alone, I don't think is sufficient to be able to win the support of the American people, because in the end, it can't be about just a party winning. It has to be about the American people winning.
That makes a lot of sense, Dennis. And after Representative Steve Scalise was shot at that baseball practice, there was this kumbaya moment where both parties said that they needed to come together and they could work together and they would work together. What happened to that, Brad?
Well, in Washington, things don't last very long, whether it's issues, whether it's camaraderie. But I tell you what can happen in 2018, and that is the art of the deal. There's a lot that would be attractive to Democrats if they're willing to reach across the aisle and not be hyperpartisan, especially on things like infrastructure. There's every state, every county, every local authority has a bridge, a road that needs repair. And this is an opportunity to rebuild America, and that is bipartisan. So my warning to Democrats is be careful what you wish for. And if you want to get rid of President Trump, then you have to wait to 2020 because he's not on the ballot in 2018.
Brad Blakeman, Dennis Kucinich, we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for being with us today.
President Trump's first year in office, an eventful one. While some events brought the nation together, others seem to drive Americans further apart. Fox News correspondent Lauren Blanchard has more from Washington.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
The inauguration of the 45th president, ushering in the new year with a solemn moment of unity. Yet the day also marking a notable turning point, a nation increasingly divided.
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
2017 introducing the term alternative facts.
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
The president also changing the law on travel, issuing an executive order stopping people from several predominantly Muslim countries from entering the U.S.
The safety of the American people and the security of American homeland continue to be the president's top priority.
Welcomed in, Judge Neil Gorsuch, named to the Supreme Court. But out the door was the president's national security advisor, Michael Flynn, as well as Chief of Staff Reince Priebus, Press Secretary Sean Spicer, Chief Strategist Steve Bannon, and Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci, among others. But it was the firing of FBI Director James Comey that led to the appointment of Robert Mueller to lead the investigation into Russia's election meddling and the Trump administration's alleged collusion with Moscow. The investigation led to the indictment of former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort and former campaign aide Rick Gates. Also, Flynn pleading guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with the Russian ambassador. President Trump insisting there was no collusion. The president fulfilling a campaign pledge in the spring.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
And another pledge in the fall.
It is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital
of Israel.
House Majority Whip Steve Scalise shot at a congressional baseball practice. The Louisiana Republican returning to the House floor 15 weeks later.
I'm definitely a living example that miracles really do happen.
Another lawmaker, Senator John McCain, dealing with illness, announcing his brain cancer diagnosis. The president's response to deadly clashes in Charlottesville, Virginia, further dividing the nation.
I think there's blame on both sides.
As did his decision to end the controversial DACA immigration program, leaving it up to Congress to extend it. Fears over a nuclear conflict with North Korea escalating amid the back and forth between Kim Jong-un's regime and the Trump administration.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
The president inserted himself into the debate over protests during the national anthem, personally attacking NFL players who chose not to stand while the national anthem was played.
Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a off the field right now?
After trying all year, Republicans fell short on repealing and replacing Obamacare, and Democrats made gains in off-year elections, winning big in New Jersey and Virginia. That was shortly before the Me Too movement began rocking Washington, with Congressman John Conyers, Trent Franks, Blake Farenthold, and Senator Al Franken among those facing allegations of sexual misconduct. Those accusations reaching a fever pitch after Roy Moore lost the Alabama special Senate election.
Part of the problem with this campaign is we've been painted in an unfavorable and unfaithful light.
The end of the year not without controversy, with the GOP delivering on tax reform. 2018 will certainly be an eventful year here in the nation's capital. All eyes will be on President Trump in his second year in office and how he handles a wide range of issues, from North Korea to whether his party can pass health care reform. His agenda will play a large role leading into the 2018 midterm elections, and we will be here to cover it all. In Washington, Lauren Blanchard, Fox News.
It's been a fixture on the White House grounds for centuries, but now part of a historic magnolia tree dating back to President Andrew Jackson is being removed. We'll tell you why. Now set to come down. The White House announcing the tree will be removed due to a safety risk. First Lady Melania signing off on that decision, but is requesting the wood be preserved and seedlings be available for a new tree. The iconic magnolia was first planted by Andrew Jackson all the way back in 1835.
Well, as Republicans work to maintain their momentum into 2018, now the Washington Examiner reports some Republicans expressing hope that President Trump's team-oriented approach to the tax bill shows he is, quote, finally learning how to legislate after some battles within the party this year. Here is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell.
We've established a really good working relationship. We work together seamlessly. And I think we go into the new year with a high level of confidence in our ability to work together with the administration and to have similar priorities.
There has been a lot of back and forth between these two as well. Karl Rove is former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Hey, Karl, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you, Julie.
Okay, so what do you say? Has Trump learned how to legislate?
Well, certainly they did have a lot of good things that happened on the tax bill that would give Republicans some sense that things will be better going forward. Let's take a look at them. Coordination. Beginning in the spring, the Gang of Six began meeting. The White House Chief of Staff, the National Economic Advisor, and the Secretary of the Treasury representing the administration. From the House, the Speaker and the Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. From the Senate, the Leader and the Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. And they met consistently, so they were closely coordinated. No surprises. That's really important. The president didn't attack the people whose votes he needed, unlike in health care, where he was launching arrows at Jeff Flake of Arizona or Dean Heller of Nevada. The president didn't attack the people whose votes he needed. He greenlighted or didn't oppose compromises that were necessary to move it forward. For example, Lisa Murkowski said, I want to include drilling in Anwar. The president favored that, but he greenlighted it. Susan Collins said, I want some commitments from the leader in the Senate as to votes on certain issues regarding Obamacare. It's unclear where the president is on those particular issues, but he didn't oppose it, thereby making it possible to get her vote. He stayed on message. When he would go out and talk about tax cuts, he would generally just talk about tax cuts. And finally, he understood the personal dimension of this all and invited people down to the White House continually, called people, personally asked for their support, encouraged them to get the job done. This is really important for a president to do, and President Trump did it in this instance.
I would like a dry erase board as well. I mean, who needs graphics when you got Karl Rove and his dry erase board? I love it.
They're cheaper, but you know, that's the good news. There's still some big challenges facing us next year. First of all, let's be honest about it. We're a 2 whiteboard day today, Julie, just for you. Just for you.
All right, go for it, Karl. You got the floor.
There was no White House plan.
No.
There was a congressional plan drafted largely by the House, mimicked by the Senate. There are lots of people up on the Hill who are working on their respective plans for the two bodies, but there was no real White House plan. Now, going forward, that could be a problem because on immigration and infrastructure and some of these other issues that are being talked about, the Republicans and the White House haven't done as much homework in preparing a plan. Second of all, this was the GOP wheelhouse. I mean, what are Republicans about? You know, making America strong defense-wise and cutting taxes. Those are two things that are in the DNA of every Republican. Some of these issues going forward, like infrastructure, are a lot harder. Reconciliation. Remember, let's not forget, this was done under the reconciliation budget procedures. You basically get 1 or 2 shots a year at that. That allows you to pass something through the Senate with 51 votes. Everything else is going to require 60 votes in the Senate, meaning you're going to have to bring some Democrats aboard. The quality of the messaging was not all that great. Yeah, he stayed on message, but I think the administration could have done a better job of explaining why tax cuts were important and how they'd affect real people. This bill was passed, but it was passed with a lot more people saying, I don't like the bill, than saying they like the bill. And finally, it's an election year, and everything gets harder in an election year.
It absolutely does. So we have to now look forward to 2018 because, you know, this past year has been a tumultuous one, but boy, did this White House get things done in the end. Mitch McConnell says that he's gotten better and better at doing what's necessary in order to be effective legislatively. So he ended the year with a lot of pluses. He obviously, the tax overhaul, he was able to repeal the mandate in Obamacare. That was a huge sticking point. How optimistic does that make you in believing that Republicans believe that basically President Trump is going to keep this momentum up come 2018?
Well, look, it gives me some hope that Republicans have some confidence restored. I mean, they were really down after the failure to repeal and replace Obamacare. This now has them upbeat. The key thing is, what do they do next? Because success begets success. So if the next thing they can pick gives them some chance of getting something done, then that'll help them get something done after that. Now, intervening, though, is they got the budget resolutions. They got to, in the next couple of weeks.
Do they go back to health care? Do you think they're going to try to repeal and replace in 2018?
I don't think so. I think they're going to end up doing incremental things on health care. Because remember, again, we have to get 60 votes in the Senate. So there's got to be an attempt to get something that gives the Democrats what they want, which is more money for the subsidies, so the premiums are restrained. But Republicans get what they want. And what they want is not necessarily clear. I think it involves getting rid of a lot of the mandates of the Obamacare, getting rid of some of the taxes, but more importantly, including some free market reforms that help drive health care in the direction of what Republicans want.
Okay. Karl Rove, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie.
Well, here's something you don't hear every day. The Library of Congress is cutting back on Twitter. The big change announcing when it comes to preserving tweets. Julie.
And an 8-hour flight to nowhere. Wouldn't you love to be on that? Why a Tokyo archive every public tweet. The library striking a deal with Twitter back in 2010 to get the text of those posts. But the library now shifting gears, citing Twitter's decision to double the allowed character count. How could you keep up with all those tweets?
I was going to go to the library and read all those tweets, and now...
and now you can't. I bet you could Google them, though.
This Fox News alert, a passenger jet on the way to Tokyo forced to turn around and head back to Los Angeles after an unauthorized person was found on the plane. It happened almost halfway through the 11-hour flight. William LaJeunesse is live in Los Angeles with more on this. William?
Before we get into the blame game, the tweets from the well-known model and the mystery passengers, here's what happened. All Nippon Air Flight 175 departs LAX for Tokyo yesterday morning. A few hours into the flight, they find out they have this unauthorized person on board. Well, it's resolved, I am told, but the flight crew opts to come back to L.A. So you have 8 hours on the plane back to where you started. On board was model Chrissy Teigen, who tweets, "Why did we all get punished for this one person's mistake? Why not just land in Tokyo, send the other person back? How is this better, you ask?" We're all asking the same questions. They keep saying the person had a United ticket. We're on ANA, so basically the boarding pass scanner is just a be-dupe machine that makes noises that register to nowhere. Well, I am told that flight scanner is actually programmed for each flight, and it tells the gate agent with a red light and a buzzer not to board the passenger. So here's what might have occurred, Rick. Both United and ANA are part of the Star Alliance. Flight 175 and United 7925 are the same flight, same plane, called a code share. However, there was a second flight, United Flight 32, departing same airport, same time, same destination. That person was probably ticketed there. So why it was not determined by the flight scanner, we're not sure, because here's what's odd. That is tied into TSA and the Japanese government computers instantaneously. So when that passenger did not match the manifest, how long did it take to find it out? Who figured it out, and why weren't they alerted earlier? ANA put everybody on another flight today. That's resolved, but that's pretty serious when that scanner, which we all rely on, didn't apparently work. Rick?
William, I could have sworn I heard you say it was Giselle was the reason they turned that plane around. Is that what you said?
Giselle? No, I didn't say no. No,
Okay.
They turned it. No, the flight
Well, that's
crew
good
decided
news. Let's
to
not
turn it
report
around. No, I guess
Where
I
did
was
that
talking
come
too
from?
fast.
I don't even
Sorry,
know.
Rick.
Julie, save me.
You're thinking
It's
things.
okay. It's his inner voices again. A new legal showdown looming. 3 major cities now suing the Defense Department. We've got details coming up.
Hey, Julie, I know today's critical, but I really need a sick day.